All right, welcome everybody to the Going Ballistic podcast, episode number 32. I'm here again with Jason. Say hello.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be back.
We both got some good feedback from the last podcast. I'm glad you guys liked it. Both Jason and I had heard things like, "Oh, we like the structure. We like how things are changing the podcast." And I'll be honest with you, we're still shooting from the hip. We're just getting better at doing it, I guess. So, the topics tonight. Everything that's happened since the Las Vegas shooting, we've seen a shift in the news coverage from calling for gun control immediately to actually some pretty good arguments out there. And I want to know, Jason, what do you think? Is it that the resolve of the anti-gun movement is so solid and fixed that they're just I don't know, I wouldn't say giving up, but they just have like their one line and that's all they have? Or is it that gun owners are getting more educated in the reasons why we have the Second Amendment and why we shouldn't have gun control? What do you think?
I think it's a combination. I mean, the education of why we have the Second Amendment, I think, is definitely progressed. But it's really nice to see after Vegas, everybody jumped right away. Gun control, gun control, gun control. And like you said, the arguments against it have been fantastic. I've never seen so many as I've seen in this last week on the news, on Facebook. It's been really great to see. And the arguments, like you said, have been fantastic. Really good arguments.
Like what do you mean? What has stuck out to you?
For instance, like you saw, there was some stuff in Congress where they were actually talking about why we have the Second Amendment and why it's important to have it, not so much to protect a person from another individual, but to protect the country from the government. I mean, that was one of the big things why it was there.
Yeah, you're talking about that video that was passed around about a guy standing up there in front, like addressing Congress back and forth and really just like hashing out all the stuff.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I loved it.
It was great, but that guy, I can't think of his name. He does a series of videos, like something like On Fire with, man, I'll look up his name. He is a pretty famous conservative commentator. That's all faked, that whole video.
Is it really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's a bummer.
Well, I say it's fake. I don't really know. It looks fake to me. And I know the guy, he does a lot of green screen stuff. So all his videos, like he starts off, it's usually like flames and fire going in the background thing. And usually, is it Bill Whittle? Was that his name?
It might be. I have it on my Facebook.
I'm looking it up right now to see if I can see it. Yeah, as soon as I saw the video, it's like, it said like best arguments for gun control or something like that. And as soon as it started, I was like, oh, he green screened himself in there. Yeah, it is. It's Bill Whittle. Yeah, the guns argument he makes. Yeah, that's all green screen. He was just standing in front of the green screen, and they just put footage of Congress in there, which bothers me obviously because the arguments were great, but yeah, he was just standing there in front of pictures of Congress.
Yeah, but the argument was solid, and then you have, of course, the stuff going on with Jimmy Kimmel and the other celebrities, and there's been a lot of hashback to them guys. In that regards also, which has been fantastic.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that Trump got elected is people are tired of all the whining and crap going on. I mean, it's true. I think so many people voted for Trump as a referendum, as a callback of all this people getting so social justice warrior about everything. So when he made the comments about the NFL, I don't think he made them the best way he could have made them. But I'm not the president. I'm not in his position. But he called out the NFL and finally came in and said, enough's enough. Stop disrespecting the flag. You're allowed to do what you want. Yeah, you have freedom of speech, but not there. You don't. You're an employee. I forget if we talked about that last time, but it's only against the government restrictions. And the NFL is not the government, even though they do get crazy tax breaks. So he finally jumped in and said something, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the president weighed in on the NFL. I even had students say that. They had said, the president shouldn't be weighing in on the NFL, and that's unprofessional. So, of course, while we're talking, I pulled up a news article of Obama weighing in on the NFL, not allowing Tebow to kneel, for praying. Well, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying this happens. And remember, everyone lost their mind because the guy was demonstrating by kneeling for praying, and that was not allowed. The NFL had no problem saying that's against the rules. No one cared about freedom of religion. But then all of a sudden the other way around. So the point I'm trying to make is the president gets involved and he's kicking butt. As of today, all the news I'm seeing is the NFL backpedaling like crazy. Colin Kaepernick has come out now and said, if I can just get a job in the NFL again, I'll stand this time. I promise. I'll stop kneeling. He actually came out like that's his stance now. He backed him off. Roger Goodell, in charge of the NFL, has now been working with owners, the teams, trying to make rules, to make the team stand. And it cracks me up that everyone gets mad at Daddy Trump coming and yelling at them. But that's kind of how it is. It's like a dad yelling at his kids, all right, enough's enough, knock it off. And then all of a sudden they start knocking it off. And the same kind of thing, I don't know, I think with gun control, is so many people are out there whining and crying about it. And people are getting a little less afraid to stand up and say, no, that's bullcrap. Yeah, gun control is not the answer. Stop bitching and moaning. Let's really talk about the facts. And yeah, do you agree, or what do you think about what Trump's election means, or that it's time to maybe start going back to some common sense in these arguments?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like you said, as far as I'm concerned, it was a cry from the people saying enough's enough. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm trying to be careful because I realize I'm live on Facebook and I'm on a podcast here. So talk about gun control and the things I normally say. I believe it or not, both sides of the argument, I might surprise people on some of the thoughts I have. But one of the main ones I have is, you're right, the Second Amendment was not about hunting. That's one of my pet peeves. And people bring up, you don't need an AR-15 for hunting. Well, first off, you don't need a rifle for hunting. You could go after it with a knife if you wanted to. You could go to get a deer with a knife if you tried hard enough, or a spear. So it's not about need. Nowhere in the Second Amendment is there a need. Nowhere in the Second Amendment is there hunting. Nowhere in the Second Amendment is self-defense against criminals. The Second Amendment is for the ability to overthrow a tyrannical government, should that happen again. That's it. So whenever I hear people say, well, we need to ban the cop killer bullets, the quote unquote cop killer bullets, like New Jersey, you can't have hollow points in New Jersey. Can't have them. Cops from out of state get in trouble driving through New Jersey, getting pulled over, having hollow points in the car. And people try to say, well, those are cop killer bullets. You shouldn't be able to have those. And I'm like, well, I'm a huge supporter of law enforcement. So do not mistake me, anybody. But honestly, what bullets should be protected except the ones that you could use to fight the government? Right? So if they came out and said only ammunition that's suitable for hunting is allowed and anything that could be used against the government is not allowed, well, that's exactly against the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment's for the government. Arguably, when people try to make the hunting distinction too much in policies, I try to ask them to stop and be careful, because hunting is what's not in the Second Amendment. Meaning, arguably, I could see a government trying to make a way to ban something that was just for hunting, because the Second Amendment doesn't protect that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So AR-15s, military-style rifles, I put quotes for those you can see, those are completely allowed. And that's what the Second Amendment protects. And not a fan of the Hughes Amendment is a comment that came in. Yeah, I think some things were done wrong. There's a big Supreme Court case, U.S. v. Miller, back in the National Firearms Act time, where they talked about sawed-off shotguns. And the guy got in trouble for having a sawed-off shotgun. I think it was the cab of his truck. And he challenged it, saying, hey, the Second Amendment protects these kind of guns. And the Supreme Court actually came back and said, no, a sawed-off shotgun is not protected as under the Second Amendment for everyone to be able to own without restriction or regulation, because we looked to common use in the military, and the military doesn't use sawed-off shotguns. Therefore, it's not protected. Well, you take that argument to its logical conclusion, then that means belt-fed machine guns are protected because they are used by the military. So it goes both ways. But yeah, so that's a point that I don't like when people make for anti-gun stuff, is you don't need that for hunting. Good. Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. And if its only purpose was for hunting, arguably the Second Amendment doesn't protect it. Second Amendment protects overthrowing a tyrannical government. Anyway.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, and then I hear some people say, the wording on the Second Amendment, says that it's only for in connection with the militia. Well, first off, that requires a reading of the amendment, of the punctuation in the reading, to assume that the Founding Fathers made a mistake. So it's to say, well, it's only in the Second Amendment they screwed up, but every other amendment we can read exactly on its face value. But there's an argument that I shouldn't have brought up here live because I'm going to get it wrong without my head. But I make an analogy to typewriters, or for dictionaries, for dictionaries for my students. And I did this last class up on the whiteboard as I wrote out. Let me try and do it off the top of my head here, even though I shouldn't even try. It is, a literate populace necessary for the growth and prosper of our country, the right of the people to own and carry dictionaries shall not be infringed. Well, that's a pretty word for word analogous of the Second Amendment, but for guns, but for dictionaries. So I started off by saying an end goal, a literate populace, which is important for these reasons. Then people people that want to have dictionaries should be allowed to. The problem is people for the Second Amendment with guns, they say, well, you should only be able to have the guns, which are talked about at the end of the amendment, as if it's in connection with the first part. And I'm saying, no, the first part is the goal. It doesn't mean you have to be there. So if you say that you should only be allowed to possess a dictionary if you're literate, that would be the same thing. And I may have just made that too complicated without being able to write it on the board. But I argue that if that were the Second Amendment, where it said a literate populace, necessary for the prosper of our country, people should be able to have dictionaries. That doesn't mean that the only people that should be able to have dictionaries are those that are literate. It says that literacy is our goal, but everyone gets dictionaries. You might need it someday. A militia is our goal if we need it someday. So everybody should have arms. Redleg 1013 said it's called a syllogism. I believe you. I don't know if it is or not, but it sounds like it's right. I shouldn't do things like that off the top of my head when I'm not prepared for it. But it's if anything, it does help strengthen the resolve for the Second Amendment. The other argument for it is a logical argument. Is Second Amendment gone away? Let's just take it out of the argument for the sake, because it's too easy for us to say to any debate, Second Amendment, debate over. Well, no, that's not the reality. Is even though what the Second Amendment should stand for, or maybe you and I believe does stand for, that's not what it stands for or completely in the law. The Supreme Court hasn't said that. The Supreme Court, even as recently as D.C. v. Heller, has said that there can be reasonable restrictions. Well, the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. Okay, needing a CCW technically to the reading of the law or the second reading of the Constitution is an infringement, right? Making you NFA Act, silencers and machine guns, that's an infringement. Saying that felons can't have guns, I think I agree with that, but that's still an infringement. So, yeah, I get some people just say, oh, the Second Amendment means this, and everyone else needs to just leave it alone. Well, no, in the real world, where we are today, right or wrong, there are allowed to be, quote unquote, reasonable restrictions to firearm ownership and use. And we can disagree or maybe agree on that, but that's the state of affairs as they are now. So taking the Second Amendment out of the argument of the debate, I think we just need to look at, I don't know what I'd call common sense, which is banning guns doesn't help solve crimes. You look at places like Chicago, Jason. Right? I think you brought that up. Chicago has some of the toughest gun laws in the country, and there's a person shot every 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
Right.
Is it 2 minutes or 2 hours and 50 minutes? 250. Multiple people a day are shot. I saw an interesting, post that somebody made that said 50 dead and 250 wounded by gunfire. No, I'm not talking about Vegas. I'm talking about the month of September in Chicago. That's happening every month in Chicago, but nobody seems to want to mention that. And I think it's because it doesn't fit the talking points about gun control. It's something that nobody wants to mess with, but it's a serious problem. We have some cities in our country that are essentially, small war zones, and banning guns doesn't work. And I tell people too, for banning things, you have to have a punishment to prevent it from happening. Okay. Or else you're going to have someone like me come along that says, so what's the crime there? Like I had an issue with, I got to remember on a podcast. I got to be careful what I say. A place I was at where they needed parking permits. And I said, well, you better get a parking permit. It was a few $100 for a parking permit. I said, okay, but we don't think they're going to enforce them in this time. Okay. So what happens if I don't get a parking permit? And they said, well, you'll get a ticket. I said, okay, well, how much is the ticket? I said, well, I think it's $25. I said, all right, I'll take the ticket. I'm not going to pay a few $100 for a parking permit if the chance is low that I'm going to get in trouble. And the penalty is not that bad. So in order to prevent something from happening with a crime, you have to make the penalty severe. As far as I know, the most severe penalty we have for a crime is murder. So if the crime and penalty for murder does not prevent someone from committing murder, and you think that another law is going to prevent them from possessing a firearm, well, then your penalty for that crime must be more than murder, because that penalty enough wasn't enough to dissuade them. So what do we need to do? Double it? You need to be killed instantly? You need to be tortured before you're killed? I mean, what would the penalty be for firearms ownership that would somehow discourage people from doing that? And I just don't think that's going to happen. That's why you can't negotiate with a terrorist. What are you going to do? Threaten to kill them? That's what they want. Yeah, it's a tough angle. The only thing you can do is not disarm the victims. And even though this happened in Las Vegas, Nevada, where as a whole guns aren't banned, it happened in a concert where guns are banned. And it was at a longer distance. I get that. It may not be the perfect scenario, but as far as I know, every single mass shooting we've ever had is in a gun-free zone. There's a reason for that. Bad guys prefer unarmed victims. The mall shooting, the movie theater shooting, Newtown, all these shootings happen where people can't defend themselves. 9/11 happened where people couldn't defend themselves. And I just don't get why people can't see that. What do you think?
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, why would somebody go where there's going to be a lot of conflict or have to worry about somebody coming back at them with a gun? I mean, I don't ever plan on being a criminal, but I wouldn't want to go against someone that had a bunch of guns or people that were carrying guns. I mean,
yeah,
my chances for success are now down to zero. And you take it even to a bigger, spectrum. You take the country as a whole, where you have a lot of gun owners. That's probably why a lot of other countries have never tried to invade our country. I mean, it's not just our military you got to worry about. All the citizens have guns.
Yeah, there's that famous quote about behind every blade of grass is an American with a gun. You ever heard that before? Yeah, it says, why haven't the reporter asked him, why haven't you invaded America yet? And that was the answer. Yeah, I get it. That's the whole point. It's supposed to be a deterrent. It's kind of like having nukes. It's the same thing. Nukes are horrible. Nukes are bad. Yes. War's horrible. War is horrible, but you do it as a deterrent to get picked on again. I would even say getting in a fist fight is horrible for people who have actually ever been in a fist fight. It sucks. You're going to get punched. And if you do punch the other person more, your hands are going to hurt. Getting in a fist fight is not fun. But if you don't ever stand up to the bully, then you're going to get picked on all the time. The best way to not get bullied in school is to punch them back in the nose. I think what schools are doing now, and one of the reasons why bullying is out of control, is they try to punish both kids in the fight. They try to discourage fighting or standing up for yourself at all costs. That's kind of what's happening here, is we're just disarming the people, making people more helpless. And I think the Las Vegas Metro Police did an amazing job. And I actually got attacked. I need to address this because I got slightly attacked on Facebook for it. They did an amazing job, but it's still true that when seconds count, police are minutes away. And that's not their fault. That's just they can't be everywhere at once. And if they can be, they can't necessarily guarantee have enough people or have enough armament to take on whatever's going on. You have to look to yourself to be able to keep yourself safe. And now the news came out this morning that the hotel security guard was shot 9 minutes before the shooting started. Did you hear that?
No, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, so instead of him coming at the end of the shooting and then, the guy shooting through the door and then killing himself or whatever happened to him, no, it actually came out today. Las Vegas police came out and said, okay, what actually happened is he was setting up all the cameras and the stuff like that, and the security guard came to check on him and see what was going on. So he shot through the door and injured the security guard, and the hotel security for 9 minutes knew that he was in there with a gun and shooting through the door and didn't do a single thing because their policy is to wait for the police. They have guns. I don't know what they're for, but had they done something, I mean, this is unfair. I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback this and say, well, he should have gone and solved it, but maybe some sort of effort to harass the guy to keep him from turning the other way for 9 minutes later till the shooting actually started could have prevented the entire thing. Holy shame on that hotel that for 9 minutes they knew there was a guy in that room with serious enough firepower to shoot multiple times through the wall and injure somebody, and nothing was done. Nothing was done. And then he did his shooting rampage. So the point is, yeah, cops are amazing. They're heroes, but they can't be there all the time. So what I did is, in response to all of this, I realized, based on our podcast, that maybe some police could use some more training. Well, I take that back. Definitely they can. And it's not because they're not good at their jobs. It's because of budgets and resources. And I had mentioned how I have troubles with some departments. Well, I actually reached out to the department again. I contacted the 3 people I knew from the department last week and said, all right, guys, what's going on? It's been 6 months. I've been trying to chase you guys down to give you free training. And from what my understanding of this department from other departments is, they're the ones that need it the most. They're the most unsophisticated in this area. And I got a couple emails back of, oh, yeah, we'll check into that. And I just rolled my eyes. Just it makes me almost want to write the government and say, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on with your law enforcement, in your area. I'm trying to help, and they're turning it down. But despite that, I decided that I would give away my book for free to anyone in law enforcement or in the military. So on Facebook, I put out a post for the ebook. I didn't want to go broke shipping books out of my house. I put the ebook up and I made a link where they can go sign up and get a free copy. And just shy of 1,000 copies so far were given out for free, which was nice. Really, it was really cool. There was maybe at least once I looked at that number and went, what would that have been in sales? but I'm very happy to have done it. I'm very happy they got it. And if anything, you guys have supported me more, as I've seen actual physical sales of the book stay steady or increase a little bit, in spite of giving 1,000 copies away. So I really appreciate it. But what ended up happening is I put a post on there saying, hey, it's come to my attention that maybe the cops aren't getting the training they need. So here's me trying to do something about it. To do something for free is here. Take a copy of the book. And I actually had some people come on there and get mad at me saying that I was disparaging cops and saying cops weren't good at their jobs. Or I had some people come on and say, how dare you make comments about the Las Vegas Metro Police Department? They're heroes and they're amazing what they do, and you're criticizing how they didn't do anything good enough. And one lady had said, like, what knowledge do I have, or what right do I have to comment on the capability of the Las Vegas Metro snipers? And I laughed when I read that one. And I wrote back, I said, who am I to comment on the quality of training the Las Vegas snipers? Well, I'm the one that trained them. So I think I know I think of anybody I'm allowed to do it. So more than once, I've had the Las Vegas Metro Police Department snipers come to me for training. So it was like too perfect that I was able to say, yes, I can comment on the Las Vegas Metro Police Department snipers, as I've been their instructor more than once. And they are, and I've repeated this to many people well before the Las Vegas shooting, the best police SWAT team I've ever worked with. They carry around rifles I think that are too heavy for their jobs, but the guys that came out to me were by far the most squared away police snipers I've worked with for every law enforcement agency ever. So it was a little bit of karma for me to like smile and be able to type that back, that I actually was able to comment. But it wasn't disparaging to the cops. It was to help them out. And I hope they enjoy their free copies. I hope it makes them better. And I hope makes them want to pursue and get more training. And I hope this makes you guys want to get more training. Jason, have you heard anything about feedback of the first aid stuff we talked about?
Not very much. There was a few things that popped up on, where they could get training or places they might be able to go. But I want to jump in real quick.
Yeah.
Anthony wrote a wonderful question. It's a question I have also. He wrote, as a civilian, how do you learn what to do in a gunfight, like what happened in Las Vegas? And I think that's important, because I think that restricts a lot of people not knowing, am I going to get in trouble? What exactly am I allowed to do? And I know we could probably do that in another podcast. That's going to take a lot to explain, and there's a lot of things to cover, but that's a great question. And
yeah,
I know certain concealed weapon classes actually cover a lot of the legal things that you can and can't do when you take those classes.
Mm-hmm.
But I would leave that more up to you. I don't think you could say that simply, but it's a great question.
Yeah, you're right. I can't say that simply. The best thing you can do is learn and train. Now, learning can take the form of reading books. It can take the form of listening to podcasts. It can take the form of going to courses by professionals. And you should measure your course not on how much of a Billy Badass the instructor thinks they are, but on how much they're willing to learn and explain things and teach. So I think I've said it plenty of times that I think the military fails with their training courses where they brag about their attrition rate. They say, "Oh, this course is so good, it's so tough that half the class doesn't graduate." To me, that's called a test. If you're measuring who can pass or not, it's not called a course. A course is about teaching and learning. So if you find somebody that wants to teach a course that has good experience, has good pedigree, good background, but they can teach and they're willing to listen and learn even from you as they go through the course, and they're not coming across as talking down to you or this is the only way to do things, take it. I take courses all the time. I've taken plenty of courses that if you were maybe to ask a third party whether I should be taking that course or whether I learned something in that course, that it might be too elementary for me or beginning. And I've taken every single one I've had the chance to do it because I've learned something from it. I may have even learned that the wrong way to do something. I may have learned something I don't agree with, but I still take the chance to learn. So one is learning from every opportunity and resource you can. And the other is practicing, putting it into practice. Is don't just hear about how to do it or try it once, go out and keep doing it. So what to do in this situation? Everybody after the fact who says what to do, specifically what to do, is wrong because you have no idea what you would have done. You have no idea what would have changed if you did something else. I mean, what if I jumped up with a bullhorn and said, everybody run this way, and we all ran in the same direction? Who knows if maybe that would have been more casualties because we would have ran into an area where he was shooting. So even the idea you have now, you don't know how it really would have played out. But I feel confident in saying that as long as you act and do something, you have a better chance of survival. Now, again, it's the same thing. You hear people saying, well, I recommend wearing a seatbelt, for example. And some people will have a story. Well, my buddy didn't have a seatbelt on and his truck flipped and he was thrown clear of the truck. And the cop said he survived because he didn't have a seatbelt on. Okay, fine. That's one exception. Or maybe somebody in that horrible shooting survived because they stood still and a bullet went on either side of them. And had they moved, the bullet would have hit them. Okay, fine. That's the exception. But in my opinion, statistically, the surefire way to become a casualty is to stand still. Not only is a moving target harder to hit, when you're moving, you're getting off of what some instructors call getting off the X. I don't necessarily like using that term because it sounds too cliche, but getting out of the bad situation is better than staying in the bad situation. And I mentioned to somebody today that you may not know what's behind the corner of that building until you run over there and see. So if you stood there and said, well, if I go behind that corner, there could be a bad guy. But if I go behind that corner, maybe there's not a bad guy, because you could what if it to death. The point of the matter is you may not have the best vantage point from where you're at. So get going one way. And if as you're running on steps 3, 4, and 5, you realize you're actually running at the bad guy, great. Turn and start running away. But you're not going to know until you got to steps 3, 4, and 5. And then when you're on steps 51, 52, and 53, you might now see a place to go hide that you didn't see before because it was a little bit over a hill. Great. Now you go and hide there. So you're constantly updating your decisions, but you're doing something. Just do anything is better than nothing. Go ahead.
So let me change that for a minute, because I think more for myself for my question. Let's say that he wasn't up, however many floors he was up, but let's say he was down at ground level, and things were going on, and I had my gun. From a legal standpoint, I believe since my life is in jeopardy that I can, do what I need to do to survive and shoot this person.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of the question people are asking. Legally, I mean, to my knowledge, so long as my life's in jeopardy and everybody else's life is in jeopardy, I can react.
Here's the problem. Laws change state by state and by area, so it's hard enough to keep track of it. I try to keep it simple. If the situation has crossed the line to the point where I'm going to die or they're going to die, and it's the bad guy's going to die.
Right.
That's my mindset. So fine, I will be prosecuted later if I did something against the rules. But I know I'm not going to be even pulling my gun out of my holster until I've decided it's time to shoot, and I don't decide it's time to shoot until I realize it's a life or death situation. So I'm either protecting someone else's life or I'm protecting my life. And you know what? If in that state, in that county, I was supposed to retreat first, well, then I'll have to pay the price for that, and I'll have to have learned that. So that's a failure on me, Anthony, was I didn't learn enough about what the rules in that state are. But if I have a chance and the guy's there, yeah, I'm going to take it. But then again, who knows in the situation, Jason? Maybe the right scenario is to get out of the way. You being right. Dead while you're trying to help everybody else really isn't going to help anything. It's the whole idea of putting the oxygen mask on yourself first on an airplane. You can only help if you're alive. There's a thing for EMTs. In ambulances, they carry a set of binoculars in all ambulances. The reason is when they come up on a crash, when there's any suspicion of any chemicals or anything involved, is they're supposed to stop away from the crash, pull out the binoculars and look and see if there's people laying around on the ground or see if there's like emergency placards. And you would think that the ambulance should be going full blast into the crime scene or the crash to try and help everybody. But no, it doesn't do you any good if you're dead too. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one to answer. And yes, you're absolutely correct. It changes state by state. Where would be a good spot for someone to start in their state? I mean, where would they actually start looking to learn those laws for their state?
Take a course. Best thing is taking a CCW or self-defense course in their state. So it's going to be covering the laws where they're at there. But when it comes to a place like that, guys, I'm sorry. For me personally, all bets are off. If I'm in a shopping mall and I see a mass shooter come around, first off, I'm with my family. I'm grabbing my family and I'm running. I'm sorry, everybody else, unless I have a chance where I think I can stop the person. But again, me getting shot, me being one of the victims that gets shot, it's not going to help anybody. But if I see the person walk out of a store in a shopping mall that's shooting everybody up and I have a chance to draw and engage, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to sit there and wonder, well, wait a minute. In this state, was I supposed to turn around and run away? Was I supposed to retreat first? I'm saving people's lives. And you have a serious responsibility when you decide to carry a firearm with you. And I am willing to go down legally to save everybody else. I am. If the situation comes to it, I'm willing to go to jail and be prosecuted for doing the legally wrong thing if it saves other people's lives.
And that's where it boils down to. Unless you're in that position, it's a hard thing to answer.
I think too many people are romanticize self-defense situations with guns, and it bothers me when I hear guys talk about what they're going to do with a gun. This is a warning here. Here's the opinion that might not be popular. I believe that if you're going to carry a gun, you need to be prepared to get smacked, maybe get your face spit on, and still not pull your gun.
That's correct.
I'm not saying every time, but you need to be prepared in the right circumstance. Not every time, but in the right circumstance, you need to be prepared that rare possibility happens. Somebody comes up to me and is saying some horrible things about my wife, smacks me and spits in my face and walks away. I can imagine a really precise scenario where I would allow that to happen without my gun coming out. Now, everyone can say, well, what if that means they're attacking you and it's going to get worse? Okay, fine. Then that's a different scenario. I want to feel attacked. But if I, for some reason, believe that that's what they're going to do as they're turning around and walking away, I'm not pulling out my gun. That's not life or death. I need to be able to have the ego that's strong enough that I'm not going to do anything like that. So that's why it's clear to me I'm not worried about it. It's either everything in the world is on the line or it's not.
Right.
So if everything in the world is truly on the line and it's truly life or death for me or my family, do you think I really care what the law is? Do I care what the speed limit is? No. If it's life or death for my family, I'm speeding. Right? That's what I'm going to do. So.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. It comes down to a life and death scenario. It's not something to wave around or be tough with.
Well, I hear guys all the time say, oh, I would carry a gun because, man, if some kid came up to me and said, hey, man, give me your keys while he's getting his truck, I'd turn around and I'd go like this and I'd shoot him. No. Maybe. No. I mean, maybe if your life is in danger and you think you're about to die, then yes, definitely do it. But maybe not. There's a chance that some 16-year-old punk that has a gun that's all he's thinking is, please, 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 just give me the keys, please, please, please. Don't do anything. And you now pulling your gun out and drawing just forced that kid into the decision from, please just give me the keys, mister, I'm desperate, to, oh my God, I better shoot this guy or he's going to shoot me. Baby. Now, the other chance is maybe you need to pull your gun out and defend yourself. I'm just saying, be careful, guys, on going so extreme one way as I want to do this. Because guess what? You're going to have to live with, if you survive, taking another human life for the rest of your life. I don't care how much of a punk that person was. It was still somebody's son, maybe somebody's brother. It was still a human being. And I'm telling you right now, you think you're Mr. Tough Guy. You think you're awesome. It's a human being. You have a serious, serious responsibility there. I think there should be more training with that, by the way. I think you should have to go read Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman's books on killing. And I think the recent one, which I haven't read yet, so I should read it, is on war. Go read those. Go talk to actual people that have been in firefights and things like that and realize what's going on. Is there's not one solution to everything here. So as Anthony's kind of pointing out, if I had a gun on me and I was in the concert, could I have done anything to solve the problem? No, probably not. I couldn't have. All I could have done is try to survive. That's a horrible scenario. That's what it is. I have to run and try and survive. But some of the first aid things I talk about, go get first aid training. I wrote an article for The Truth About Guns that somebody had put a comment on there that said, oh, nice to hear a transcript of the podcast, because I essentially went through my argument on the point of self-defense is defense. Is it doesn't matter if you killed the other guy if you died too. So the other guy dying is irrelevant. It's the fact that you stayed alive. And I wrote the whole article on that premise. And it's true. So for your training, Anthony, also in that gunfight Las Vegas situation, not only did you, oh, Anthony read on killing, awesome. Not only do you act and do something, which is better than doing nothing, the defensive side of it, the first aid side of it, what kind of first aid training have you had? Even just CPR training. Would you be able to help CPR when you're finally in a safe spot and someone's sitting there having a heart attack? You should probably know that. Do you know that you should worry about the airway before you should worry about breathing? They call it the ABCs, so it's airway, breathing, circulation. That's like the first three things you should be thinking of before all this like high-end fancy medical techniques. Those three things, ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. If their airway is blocked, you're going to have an awesome tourniquet and bandage on a dead patient because they're going to die if their airway is blocked. So first, you got to make sure the airway is clear. That's where you mentioned, I said that I think the safety pin last week, the tongue to the cheek or an airway or something to get the airway clear. The second thing is, are they breathing? I don't care if their leg is spurting blood out like a garden sprinkler. If they're not breathing, stopping that leg isn't going to help anything. You're going to have, again, a pretty bandage on a dead person. So you have to focus on the breathing next. Then once you got the breathing figured out, now you can worry about the circulation and the blood. You know, I talk about scenarios where I had a conversation this week with somebody at the local office I kind of use in Nashville. And they were talking about some, first aid training. And I said, well, one lesson I had in some of the tactical medicine training that I had that has stuck with me is I walked into a room and they had the guy in the middle of the room holding his leg with all this blood all over the place. And he's screaming, my leg, and he's screaming his head off. And so all his attention's there. So I run to him and I fix him. And then when I'm done, I look up and the instructor says, excellent. Are you done? I said, what do you mean? And if you hear that question, you know you're not done. So I stopped and said, what do you mean? I looked around and he pointed at the guy sitting behind the door that was now dead because that guy had a breathing problem. They simulated something for breathing. So I made the mistake of going into the room and paying attention to the guy screaming and waving his arms and not to the guy that was breathing. So that's a lesson right there, Anthony. I mean, you need to be able to see people and say, yeah, that guy's screaming his head off, but this person over here is choking, or this person over here got hit in the throat. I need to try and fix this person first. And then when it comes to the bleeding, what do you do to try and stop the bleeding? Do you know how to use a tourniquet? Do you understand why you should fix things? Steven says, the manual says massive hemorrhages first. Sure. I can't disagree with you because that's what the manual says. But at the same time, somebody who's got a complete obstruction of their airway, Steven, is going to be dead in what? A couple minutes? Define massive hemorrhage. I don't know. Now on the same patient, I think we could split hairs here, but I definitely see your point. So, and Tony said, I see a lot of people doing chest compressions on people with huge bleeding holes in their body. Yes. If they're not breathing at all, I get your point. The lesson here though is don't be fooled to chasing the scary looking screaming thing when maybe something else is a problem. So my point is the person they choked on something and you're fixing their leg and you've ignored the fact that they're choking. So by the time you fix their leg, they're gone. That's all. But tourniquets, do you guys know how to use tourniquets? Which tourniquets do you like? Which tourniquets are you trained on and how to use, things like that. So I mentioned a granola wrapper last time for a chest seal. Jason, are you familiar with chest seals?
No, I am not.
All right. So the chest seal theory is there's a thing called tension pneumothorax, which is what you will get when you have pierced through the chest cavity, because your lungs only work because there's like a negative pressure or there's no pressure between your lungs and the wall of your chest cavity. So your diaphragm pulls down. Nothing else can happen but your lungs can inflate like these bags. Okay, right? Your lungs themselves don't pull open. There's no muscles to your lungs. They're just in a fixed container. So as the diaphragm at the bottom of your chest, which is the muscle that kind of essentially runs along your rib cage, Tony's right. Yeah, they call it a sucking chest wound. Yep, because it makes a sucking sound when you get it in your chest. Well, as that whole muscle pulls down as the diaphragm, the only thing that can happen is the lungs can inflate because there's no air, there's no anything between the lungs and the rest of the chest cavity. That's why people can mimic this with like a balloon, mason jars, and things like that. Well, the problem is if you have a hole in your chest, when that diaphragm pulls down, the air is going to go into the hole in your chest and in through your mouth. So your lungs aren't going to inflate. So even just by taking an ice pick wound into somebody's chest can actually cause them to die from suffocation, because when they're trying to breathe in and that diaphragm goes down, the air is going into both holes and they're not actually able to inflate the lungs at all. And the problem is each breath, it gets worse and worse and worse. And so it's called tension pneumothorax, or the sucking chest wound calls it. Red Lake said all chest wounds suck. That's funny. The idea is that air gets between the lungs and the chest cavity, and now you can't inflate your lungs. You can't survive anymore. And that's a serious problem. Well, what'll happen is, to see a tension pneumothorax, which is caused by a sucking chest wound, is you will see one side of the chest, the side that's injured, start to get rigid and higher than the other side. So medically they call that a unilateral rise and fall of the chest. So if you look at somebody and one side, so not bilateral, not both sides, but unilateral, one side, if one side of the chest is rising and sinking when they're breathing and the other side's not moving, that's one sign. That's called a unilateral. The other sign is called tracheal deviation. You'll actually see the trachea pushed to the side that doesn't have the wound because there's so much pressure on the other side. That means that no matter how hard they try to breathe, their lungs aren't inflating and they're not getting any air in there. So to fix those, you want a bandage that prevents more air from getting in the hole, and it helps the air burp out. So when I said a granola bar wrapper, I would never recommend a granola bar wrapper unless it's the only thing you had around. If the only thing you had, I'd try it. You smack it on the wound, and when they exhale, it allows some of the air to burp out. So if you can picture bloody, sweaty, nasty hole in somebody's chest, that you smack this granola bar wrapper on, and as they're breathing out, you could imagine how you're not going to make a very good air seal. Air is going to be able to burp out of that, right? But when they inhale, air is not going to be able to get back in because it's going to suck itself down and seal. So they'll be able to get air in only through their mouth. And then the next time they exhale, it'll start to burp some of the air out, and then they'll inhale again. And they'll actually, through breathing, be able to fix themselves if you do a seal like that. You can do it with, there's stuff called Vaseline gauze, which is aluminum foil wrapper with a piece of gauze in there and Vaseline. You peel it apart and smack it on. There's actually brand named seals you can buy that are just extremely sticky, foam stick tape with a valve on it. You smack it over the sucking chest wound and the valve, breathes and burps for itself. But that right there is a way that you could sit there and watch somebody die over the next 5 minutes because you don't know what to do, or you're pumping on their chest, you're doing something, you don't realize that they're actually dying. Or you can figure out how to take a piece of plastic or a granola bar wrapper or something like that and save somebody because they had a sucking chest wound. So please, guys, go get training.
I also see we have another Kleckner chiming in on your podcast there.
That's funny. I didn't see Jared's there. I saw people chiming in. What's up, Jared? You're back in Phoenix now. So Jared is another Kleckner boy. Just so you guys, if you ever wonder if there's a Kleckner and it's related to us, it is. So
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So awesome. So you have anything out there for that? I assume you mean for the chest seal. I don't know when that came in, Jason. Is that when he chimed in for that?
No, he was more asking, people freeze in tough situations, and if there was a type of training to help you train for extreme situations like that. None that I know of. Maybe you, but I don't know what kind of training.
I'll tell you what, this is a bad answer. No. And the reason is, even if you went to a training course, all you're going to learn is whether you're somebody that freezes. I hate to tell it to you, people. Sometimes some people just freeze. It's a fact of life, and you don't want to admit that about yourself, but maybe you do. The first time I was shot at in Afghanistan, when we went through a guard checkpoint, we're sitting in the back of a Toyota Tacoma, what they call them, Toyota Hiluxes. They're out there. They're pretty awesome trucks. As it happened, I stopped. I froze for a few seconds. Wait, is that real? Like, wait, what is this really happening? And I had the guys next to me and in front of me reacted a couple seconds before I did. And I distinctly remember having to go, get out of it and like snap out of it. So that was a rude awakening to me. Is I never expected that to happen, but it happened for a few seconds. It can happen. It is. I mean, so some good training is. I just found out about. I don't know, is he our nephew or second cousin? Terry heading up to the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
T3. That's awesome. I need to send him some stuff in the mail to get him in trouble. To mess with him. I think I'm going to send him a postcard that says, "Hey, man, I hope everything is going well. Sounds like they're treating you right. I can't wait to meet that drill instructor that you said is really hot. He sounds dreamy." Or something like that. Just to get him in trouble.
That's horrible.
On the postcards, these drill instructors can read it. So no, there's practicing in stressful situations. So if you are going to go training out at the range, practicing when you've been stressing yourself. So even if you're physically stressing yourself, that helps. I like scenarios where you're trying to have people trying to do math problems at the same time they have somebody yelling at them at the same time they just got done running a mile. So for example, some of the stress shoot, we just called them stress shoots in the military. What we would do is we would take a simple set of problems or a simple clue or something to memorize. Then you would take off and go run for a mile in your gear and come back. And as you're panting like crazy and can't breathe and have a hard time holding still, that's when you would have to shoot this target if the answer was an odd number, and if the picture they drew, the building was to the north side of the train track, you shot that picture. And so it made your brain go crazy as you're trying to think, and practicing that, you can actually get good at it. The medical stuff, of course, you can get training just by going and get training, but don't go overboard either. Right? I don't expect you to carry a full EMT paramedics bag with you, but I think people are starting to like the idea more of maybe carrying something in their back pocket. You can fit a small tourniquet, a chest seal, and a piece of quick clot gauze in your back pocket. They make them pretty small. They make them the size of maybe a wallet. Now, none of them are ideal, but they're better than having nothing. And I don't know if that would have been priceless in that situation, but having that stuff with you still doesn't help if you don't know how to use a chest seal, right? If you never knew what a sucking chest wound was or what tension pneumothorax was and how to look for it, you're just going to walk up to the first casualty you see and smack a chest seal on their face. It's not going to do any good. So getting some education, sad reality of life, man.
So I have to ask, 84 Roberto is asking about the new Trigger Tech trigger. Is there a new trigger?
There is. There is.
Better than the one I have? I won't be happy about that.
It's better than the one you have. Yeah, I think they call it the Diamond. He was actually in town. I was supposed to meet up with him this weekend. He came into town and called the owner of the company and called me, and it was just too busy with the families, and he was too busy. I think it was his travel, but I didn't reach out. So I'm sorry if you're listening. Yeah, he had actually reached out to me and mentioned that it was coming out, and I was excited, and I couldn't say anything about it. It's not really better than the one you have, Jason. It's just more adjustable. So you can go down to 4 ounces with it if you want to.
Oh, I don't know. I'm still happy with mine.
Yeah, the feel of yours compared to this one's not going to be any different. It just has a much wider adjustment range. So it's a really nice trigger. It's still the way to go, and they're still dominating everything else. So I'm excited about it.
So speaking about my guns, I have not been able to get out shooting. I'm going to try my best to get out this weekend and finish dialing in my vertical adjustments. So I wanted to talk to you, and after this weekend, I want to start, of course, working on my windage. My ultimate goal is to, try to place a shot within reason the first time versus seeing, okay, my bullet blew this far off. Mm-hmm. Any good suggestions for me on how to start learning my windage other than just, okay, the wind's blowing this hard and write it down for that day?
Man, I need to start going back and listening to our podcast because I already repeat myself. It's even worse when I'm on a podcast. You guys have like recorded proof I repeat myself. So, Jason, you tell me if I'm repeating myself here. Okay. The best way to get good at wind is one, practice and doing it wrong. So do it, figure out what worked or didn't work, and then correct from it. And that requires being honest with yourself. And if you go shoot with a spotter, it's even better because you guys can together decide, all right, we're going to shoot a 1/2 mil left because I think that's what the wind is blowing left to right. I'm going to shoot a 1/2 mil left into the wind. You shoot, you miss, and say, maybe a little bit more. Maybe it's 3/4 of a mil. Try that. You shoot and you hit. Then you learn, that's 3/4 of a mil. But if you're just kind of fudging while you're in your scope and you're not really making a call ahead of time and seeing it, kind of like a flashcard, when you're studying with flashcards, You have to look at the question, think of the answer, and then flip it and check and see if you were right. That's what you should do with wind. Don't do this thing where you're looking at the question and the answer at the same time and going, oh, I would have got that. No, say I'm going to shoot this wind hold. Try that wind hold and see what happens. That's one way. The other way is just know that the wind exists. Here's what I mean. You're shooting at a target. Let's say you're shooting at a 12-inch by 12-inch target at 300 yards, and you feel a wind blowing left to right. And you look down range and you see a wind blowing left to right. You're foolish if you aim at the center of the target. You are. There's no reason to aim at the center. You know there's a wind blowing left to right. You don't know if it's a 1 mile an hour wind or a 5 mile an hour or a 10 mile an hour wind. You just know there's wind going left to right. Well, aiming at the center is silly because you now are only using half of the width of the target. You know the bullet is not going to go to the left of the center. You know it's either going to it's either going to hit where you're aiming, or it's going to blow to the right. So if you have a wind blowing left to right at the range, you might as well be starting to aim at the left edge of the target. Then you have at least the full target's width to hit. So when people want to try and learning wind, Jason, when you're in your position, that's what I'd say. You go out there and you feel a left to right wind, at least recognize the fact you have a left to right wind and don't dare aim in the middle. Instead, aim at the side. You'll be better off. You checking comments?
I am actually. No, I was reading. No, because Jeff Williams actually had a really good point as far as the minimum range that it would actually be effective. I don't see much difference at 100, 200. Even at 300, I didn't see a lot of change. Now 400, especially with my AR, I saw a huge change.
Yeah, 300 you'll really start seeing it. 200, I think reasonable people could disagree. 100, I don't see it. I don't even pay attention to the wind at 100. I mean, I know it's affecting it, but it's just so quick. It's not much at all. So, right. Jeff, a really good way to practice wind is not distance, it's caliber. Go get yourself an accurate 22 long rifle and shoot at 100 yards. You will get good at wind, right? Because the wind's going to blow the bullet. It really does affect it at 100 yards. So if you don't have the distance, you don't need the distance. You just need to go down, get yourself a 22 long rifle, get some match grade ammo. So at least you know the bullet's hitting where you were aiming, and you'll get good at figuring out wind. But that wind's not going to be analogous to a bigger caliber, though. It's just going to teach you to pay attention to the nuances of the wind. So does that make sense, Jason? What I'm saying is if you see a left to right wind, you shouldn't be aiming in the center. You should at least be aiming at the left edge of the target.
Oh, absolutely. And I pretty much knew the answer. I just wanted to kind of throw it out there. It's going to boil down to just literally getting out and doing it and learning it. It's not as simple as what I'm doing now, the vertical. Because the vertical, once that kind of gets established, it's pretty much there.
Well, here's the way to
the wind
answer.
Is just
when a guy's walking, when your cousin's half jogging, when he's trotting across your backyard, how far do you lead him with the football? How far away is he?
Yeah.
How fast are you throwing the football? What's a trot? What angle is he trotting at? Is he going straight side to side, or is he going at a 45 degree away from you? Right? Is there any way that I could teach you how to do that with a mathematical formula? No. One is we're always going to disagree on how many miles per hour his trot is. We're going to disagree on the exact angle they're running, whether they look like they're speeding up or slowing down because you can see that they're sprinting and picking up speed or not. With the distance that they're at, all this is going to change. I couldn't tell you that with a mathematical formula. The only way you would be able to get good at leading somebody to throw that ball to them is by doing it. Do you agree?
I agree.
Same exact thing. If you know how to lead somebody in your backyard just goofing off, it's because you've tried it and you failed and you learned how to do it and you just let your brain figure it out. Same thing is true with wind, in my opinion.
Yeah, wind is a hard thing. I've played with it very little. Like I said, I got to the point where I wanted to backtrack, get my vertical stuff done first, then go back to it. But yeah, it's a tough one for me anyway right now.
So Anthony just said, don't let Ryan look at the clock. I assume it's because we're running out of time. Well, I'll take that as a compliment, Anthony. That means you want us to keep going. But don't say don't let Ryan look at the clock if you don't want me to look at the clock. Anthony, do not think about pink elephants having sex. What did you just think about, Anthony? All right. So do we have time to get to Drew's question, Jason? You see that there?
Yeah, let's get to it.
Hi, Ryan. First focal plane versus second focal plane. On a second focal plane, why can we not multiply the inverse magnification by the subtension when not at full magnification? I know what you mean, Drew. I think I just might have lost everybody, though. You can do that. There's no rule that says you can't. I don't know what you're talking about. In the course I just had in Arizona a couple weekends ago, I mentioned that to people on how to do that, and how Vortex actually is the first manufacturer I've seen go out of their way to make marks on some of the power rings. So some of the higher end Vortex scopes, you look on the power ring, some people will see why there's dots or a line or things marked on the power ring, as they've said, hey, you got a second focal plane scope, and yeah, the minutes or mils only equal minutes or mils at full power. However, if you're at about 57% power, they are twice as big, because it's not really true that it's half the power is twice as big in the magnification of the scope. But they figured it out for you. They said, well, if you turn to this power setting right here, now equals 2 mils or 2 minutes. And if you turn to this hash mark, it equals 4 mils or 4 minutes. So they've actually, Drew says nobody lists that in the use of second focal plane. And no comparison article ever. Well, Drew, I will write one for you. Okay. And if I can remember your name when I do it, I'll try to. I will mention you in it for saying thanks for doing it. But yes, and that is completely possible to do. And I mentioned it in the course. So Drew, I guess your answer is come take a course. Or check out the advanced book when I finally get it out, because it's in the advanced book. It is. I have it in there. I talk about how to do the calculations to figure out what your subtension should be at various magnifications. So I'm glad you asked that. That was a little geeky, which is why I like it, but I hope we don't lose anybody else. All right, Jason, you have anything else to cover or talk about based on either the news or the shooting or... Well, I got something real quick. You guys shut down Rocket FFL again, so thank you for all the support. I upgraded to like big boy hosting for the website, and you guys still shut it down with everyone coming to want to try and see things about getting an FFL or gun laws or stuff like that. And we are still each day getting more and more people signing up for the Get Your FFL course. I really appreciate it. I sent out an email to the people on the Rocket FFL email list today, essentially saying, hey, Trump can't stop these gun laws. I'm sorry to break it to you, but your biggest threat for firearms restrictions is not the federal government. I hear so many people say, oh, I don't need to worry about more gun control because we got Trump in office. Well, guess what? The gun control you need to worry about is not the federal gun control, which is what Trump can stop. You need to worry about the state level gun control. Right? So right now, does California ban AR-15s, or most AR-15s, or what you and I would call an AR-15? Yes. Does New York? Does Connecticut? New Jersey? Yes. Did Trump do anything to help you with that? No, nor can he. Those are state laws. Are silencers illegal in certain states? Yes, they are. Does that have anything to do with the president? Absolutely not. So guys, please stop thinking that you're safe, that you got Trump in place. These states are going to figure out soon enough that all they got to do is make the bans themselves, and they can ban the activity. And it's easy for us to, pick on California and say, oh, you guys are idiots for moving there. You should move out. Well, what happens when every state does the same thing? There's nowhere left to move. So I put that out there as an email, as a shameless sales tactic to try and help people get their FFLs, because even in these states that ban all these things, typically the FFLs are exempt from that. In the law actually says it doesn't apply to FFLs. So I was trying to, try and get people to check out the course and sign up for it. But I mean it. Please don't wait till it's too late. So I appreciate it. And Jason, I'll let you answer. I asked you if there's anything else you wanted to cover.
The one thing I did want to bring up that we didn't get to from earlier on all this stuff is I saw where the NRA was supporting the regulations of bump stocks. Did you see that as well or no?
I did. And the only reason I'm sighing is I got to remember I'm on a podcast. I'm not sitting around talking to gun guys with drinking around the fire. How do I say? There are certain things that we do as a firearms industry and people that really just, we kind of poke the bear in the eye. I'm not willing to say on the record that that's what the bump stock is or the slide fire stock is, but nor am I even willing to say that that's a bad thing. The Second Amendment doesn't say you're allowed to have guns as long as you don't, offend anybody. But sometimes the best way to win a fight is not to get in one, and not pushing the limits on things and flaunting certain things might be the best way to not get too much attention upon yourself. I think that's with almost any policy, not just with guns. You want to live a certain lifestyle and it's not popular, it's not accepted around where you're at. Maybe the best thing to do is not to go flaunt the lifestyle. So it makes an issue for everybody to have to deal with it, that you're going to get in trouble or ban it. With the firearms, I think we need to be vocal. I think we need to stand with resolve in the Second Amendment. But again, I'm not saying the live fire stock was one of those, but we shouldn't go out of our way to push the boundaries because we have enough things that we're fighting for. I also think that the NRA catches a lot of flack for being so extreme for gun control. That's another thing that we do that might be a little too much. So when they did this one, I kind of can't fault them. They didn't say they should be banned. They said they should be up to the ATF to regulate. And I think that was actually kind of smart. That allows them to say, hey, we're not calling for the ban or the allowance of them. We're just saying the ATF is supposed to be enforcing these laws already. They're supposed to be making the determinations on what counts as a part that makes a machine gun and what counts as a part that doesn't. Let the ATF do that. And by doing that, they kind of picked a good way out of an unwinnable fight. It's hard for the average American person that's not a gun rights advocate, maybe, to understand why these things should be okay. And so instead of coming out on what might have been a losing battle, they instead said, hey, man, let's do the ATF's job. Why don't we all back out of this and not make any new laws and let the ATF do what they're supposed to do? Whether they're doing that in change for anything else political, like for national reciprocity or silencers or things like that, I highly doubt, because nobody makes a deal like that and expects the other side to follow through. But politically, that's a hard one to swallow. Even when I argue for the Second Amendment, it's hard for me to say, yeah, and bumpfire stocks are the best thing going. I think they're allowed. I think they're completely protected by the Second Amendment. I just told you I don't think machine guns should be restricted at all. But it's a workaround. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I think they did the right thing. I mean, they're not saying to ban them, and it's so hard to get into. I mean, because it's one of those things where, okay, well, if we start here, where does it end? It goes so many different directions. But I'm not against looking at where they fall regulation-wise, because the firearm that I purchased didn't come with it. It's an add-on for sure. Just like my silencer is. I had to go through a whole bunch of, paperwork and follow the process for that. So I think it's one of those things that fall back to it's going to be a good argument.
Yeah. So how much does a bumpfire stock cost? It's a couple $100, right? Before everyone went into panic buying, and now they're $1,000.
Right, now they're all being purchased.
So here's the best sales pitch I can give you, and I'm even warning you it's a sales pitch, everybody. It's like, after you getting whatever model is and tax and shipping, it's probably about $300. If you got yourself a Type 7 FFL, I don't know, if you went to a really awesome company called Rocket FFL for your training, you could get a Type 7 manufacturer's FFL and pay for all your professional training on how to get an FFL and all the rules and laws and everything about it. For total, I think it would be $209 with the class and the Type 7 FFL. That's cheaper than a machine gun. Cheaper than the slide fire stock. And with that, you can make a machine gun. You can have a real machine gun, guys. You can go spend $290 for a bumpfire stock, or for $209, you can get like the federal approval. And that, by the way, that $209 will count for 3 years. So you need to pay another $150 to get it for the next 3 years. And then, of course, you'll have to pay. There's more money. You got to be an SOT, but that counts for everything, too. That counts for buying and selling silencers. That counts for all sorts of stuff like that. So it's $500 for the NFA tax to be an SOT, but that doesn't apply just to this. Again, that allows you to get all the silencers and things like that. But with that Type 7 FFL, which I have, I could tonight, Jason, at the end of this podcast, I could go grab one of my AR-15 receivers, grab my DeWalt drill, and turn it into a machine gun in less than 5 minutes. Perfectly legal. I don't have to wait for approval from the ATF in advance. I don't have to fill out any forms in advance. Matter of fact, just within 24 hours after I've made it, I need to give the ATF a heads up that I made it. That's all, just a notification. So I just don't get why people are wanting to go pay $1,000 for a bump fire stock, which sucks because it only bump fires. And even then, sometimes you can do it too quick or not quick enough. It takes some practice to try and get used to. Or you could get yourself an FFL for cheaper and you could actually make 1,000 machine guns if you wanted to on your own, like real no joke machine guns. I'm obviously biased, but I don't get why more people don't do it.
Well, I'm looking forward when I have time, of course. Time is of short demand, unfortunately, but
yeah,
I am actually looking forward to taking the course.
Good. I can't believe I haven't even offered it yet, but of course the podcast sponsors your course, Jason, so you can go through. Could you commit to a chapter a week as like a homework assignment in the course?
After this week, I think I can.
All right.
This week is due week for me, but
I think you can get through a chapter in 20 minutes. And you can do it from wherever you have your smartphone. So you literally could be on the crapper getting your FFL. That's the beauty, I think, of the course is that you don't have to be in a certain spot. You can be anywhere you want and get the training. So if you can do that, then we can talk about each chapter if you want on the way, and we can go from there.
Oh, that'd be great. And I think we should. Yeah, I could.
Anthony asked, what about the large fee for the export regulation? That's the ITAR fee one that might be going away with export control reform. Jason, if you can remember, we'll talk about that next time. But Anthony, that's actually if you build or make any gun part, not just guns. So even non-FFLs have to pay that. That's only if you're manufacturing those parts. So yes, you would have to pay an ITAR fee. I'm sorry. The fees added up. I just tried to say that for people who are trying to get a slide fire stock for $290, they don't think anything about it. You can get your FFL for cheaper than that. I just don't get it. So Tony says he's taking his time. It took him a week to do the whole course. Well, I appreciate you taking it, Tony. So, all right, Jason, I think we probably should wrap it up. We've taken enough of everyone's time.
Yeah. I know they want us to keep going, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. I feel like we just I rambled too much, but maybe that's what they're coming in for. So guys, save your questions for next time and come in next time with your questions. And Drew, I will put an article out there, but I'm not going to give away too much because, again, it's going to be in the book. All right. Are you good, man?
I am good. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It's great just talking with everybody and just being here. Thank you, Cuz, for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on, buddy. Everyone keep sending in your great questions. And we kind of promised that we'll get more professional and formal as we go. Maybe we'll start actually sending it. We really talk for like 5 or 10 minutes for the podcast to kind of see what's going on. I'm like, all right, let's go, and we'll hit the button and go. But one last plug, shout out, or a few last plugs. Rocket CCW is starting pretty soon. I think it's 6 days now. So by the time we do our next podcast, it'll have already been launched and ready to go. So make sure you go check that out to get your concealed carry permit in over half the country, which, by the way, Nevada's covered. So if you had Rocket CCW and you went to Las Vegas, you would be able to carry your handgun concealed legally, and you would have been qualified online in under a half hour by taking Rocket CCW. I would have liked to have been able to carry concealed when I go to Vegas, and I will be after that. The other thing is the Hunt Backcountry podcast. Those guys are amazing. They had me on for a third time over the summer, and they finally just released the episode. Go check it out, because I'll go support them. They're good dudes, and I really appreciate what they're doing. So see you guys all next week. Thanks for everyone chiming in and chatting and sending in the great questions. Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.